In the heart of East London. Sounds kind of like a cheesy title of a romance novel. But no princesses here or candlelit dances. What we had was basically one of the most disturbing serial killers. A chef with an emotional range of a stone. Seriously, his face looked like he lost a poker game every single day, which I cannot really judge because me too. But he wasn't there just for love or even a cheeky Netflix and chill kind of moment. What he really was looking for was skinny, young, very vulnerable guys that he could drug with GHB, the infamous date essay drug, or as some twisted people call it, party crasher in a bottle. And once they were actually drugged and unconscious, Stephen would do the worst thing unimaginable. He abused them, filmed them, and in some cases ended their lives. Just 1 year and a half. 4 young men turned up dead. And guess what? All of them mysteriously were found very close to where Stephen lived. Surprising. Was it a coincidence? Well, spoiler, absolutely not. And of course, every single victim had GHB in their system. But wait, it gets better or worse. Because it wasn't just the killer failing, the police managed to fumble this case like it was sports. They basically ignored signs, dismissed evidence like it was nothing, a lot of missed chances. Basically, this guy had more extra lives than Mario Kart. Every time you thought they had him, boom, he slipped away. And to top off all of it, the police kept saying that all these cases that sound very similar, they cannot be connected. No, for sure, because 4 young men, all drugged with the same systems, dying near the same dude's flats. It's not. I guess for them it was just a funny coincidence. So welcome back to another Beauty and Crime Sunday with me, in which I do my skincare while I talk about the chilling cases I found this week. And well, today we are technically going to the British land. So in today's case we're talking about Stephen Pond, better known as the Grindr Killer, a man who used 3 deadly weapons: technology, silence, and the most important part, police negligence. So now let's actually start with the story. Stephen's childhood looked normal, let's say, at least on paper. Mom, dad, a younger brother, and a very modest family home. But let's just say this kid wasn't really the life of the party. He was kind of quiet, a little withdrawn, and about as socially smooth as a broken toaster. That of course made him a perfect target for bullying at school. Classmate, well, they thought he was weird, and that stuck with his childish behavior that lingered well into adulthood. And according to people that actually knew him back then, Stephen never really formed close bond or long-lasting friendships or relationships with anyone in high school. Basically, if there was an invisible kid, that would be Stephen. Even as an adult, that weird, awkward vibe would follow him all into adulthood. Neighbors did describe him as strange, with a monotone way of speaking, very calm, a very vacant stare, and the social skills of, well, someone who actually never had any. So emotionally, he never seemed to really grow up, and physically he was very pale, thin, and with a very blank poker face expression. So co-workers said he was flat, kind of robotic, like a badly programmed NPC. Stephen basically trained as a chef, but a spoiler alert, Gordon Ramsay was never going to be screaming at him at a Michelin star restaurant. Instead, he did work at night shifts and kitchens. He was a Bass Depot cook in West Ham. Not very glamorous, honestly. Though, fun fact, he actually popped out in 2014 in MasterChef. Well, technically in an episode of Celebrity MasterChef. You can kind of spot him in the background, wig and all, helping cook spaghettis and meatballs for bus drivers. And yes, he wore a bleach blonde toupee to look younger. Very subtle, Steve. Very subtle. He did live with his parents well into his 30s before finally getting his own apartment, well, a one-bedroom flat in East London. Not really for independence or style, just because he needed privacy. Privacy for what, you might be asking? Well, let's talk about the chemsex. Chemsex, for those that you are blissfully unaware, which by the way, me too, I didn't know what the fuck that was, is basically a party where sex meets drugs. Not in the casual, a glass of wine and a bad decision. We're talking about hardcore substances like GHB, mephedrone, and crystal meth. Drugs so strong that could keep the encounters for hours or even days sometimes. For some, it's freedom and pleasure, you know. For others, it's really how to ruin your health and maybe die started pack. And surprise, well, Steven decided to dive in head first into this scene. His sex life was surrounded by Grindr, and he did develop a very specific obsession. Young, skinny, always someone that he could actually dominate. And since he was kind of skinny himself, it had to be very skinny, young-looking guys, so he could drug them and control them. Neighbors also kinda realized that he was doing some creepy things. He had a very creepy behavior. One man, Brian, described Steven as peculiar, forced, and sometimes aggressive. And no surprise here, really. Obsessed with very young men. And as time went on, Steven's behavior went a little more dangerous. More planned and also more repetitive. He wasn't just sleeping the GHB into drinks anymore, he was also filming the man, storing disturbing searches on his computer like unconscious boy in GHB. This wasn't really random, it was calculated. So Steven also kinda hit a very disturbing paraphilia, somnophilia. In plain English, this really means that he's turned on by people unconscious, which, great. I didn't really want to know that information. I didn't know it had a name. And yeah, that's right, he got his kicks from having sex with people who couldn't really move, react, or even breathe properly in some cases. So combine that with GHB in very high doses, which can cause total unconsciousness or death in some cases. And you can probably guess where this is going. Over time, Steven's crimes escalated because they always do. They get bored very easily. So more victims, more drugs, and even more danger. And while his method really, they did become a little systematic. What's shocking is this weren't even his first attempts. There were others before the murder. By this point, Steven, as you can see, he already has a lot of red flags to basically decorate a whole amusement park. So before he was even arrested, he had been linked to an abuse complaint. The police also even identified him as a witness of interest. But guess what? They didn't actually do anything, so Steven just kept on doing Steven things. Drugging, abusing, and sleeping right under the radar. So in 2012, he met a 19-year-old student on Grindr and he invited him over. The guy, though, he found something funny in his glass of wine, like a mysterious powder in the bottom. What could it be? Spoiler, that wasn't really protein powder. Moments later, though, he did black out and woke up with flashes of being assaulted in Steven's bed. He did survive, which is always good, but instead of going to the police, he just quietly saw a campus doctor. Another chance missed. This could also be because probably he was hiding, he wasn't openly gay yet, so most of the people that were essayed by him, probably they hid it because, you know, they were ashamed. So understandable. But the same year, on New Year's Eve, another man was drugged and abused. And by January 2013, yet another victim came forward, saying Steven had repeatedly mixed things in his drink until he collapsed. But the report went nowhere. No arrest, no investigation, nothing. But then, in June 2014, Steven invited a 20-year-old man that he also met on Grindr, so we can see the strategy. Within seconds of arriving, the young man collapsed. When he woke up, panicked and screaming, Steven didn't call an ambulance, no. He dragged him to the train station like a piece of luggage. British transport police saw the guy vomiting, barely able to stand. But Steven told him he's fine, he just had too much GHB. And they did believe him. And seriously, how many get out of jail free cards can he get? But eventually, after all this cases, he got bored, like they always do, and he escalated it to murder. Yes. Anthony was the first, just 23 years old, studying fashion in London, extroverted, very fun, and making a bit of money as an escort. But on June 17, 2014, Anthony met Steven after arranging a meet-through on escort sites. But days later, Anthony was found dead outside of Steven's own building. And who called it in? Steven himself, pretending he didn't even know the gun. But police arrived, found a body with GHB, no phone, no obvious injuries, and someone decided it was probably an overdose. The only charge Steven actually faced: obstruction of justice. Oh, on his laptop, by the way, all incriminating things, which, by the way, sat for 10 months without being examined there at the police station. Then we have Gabriel Kobari, 22. He had just moved to London and for a while even stayed at Steven's flat, though he told friends he felt a little uncomfortable at times. But on August 28, 2014, his body was found against the cemetery wall. Again, no phone, but a bottle of GHB planted in his pocket. And everything actually did look a little staged. But did police suspect foul play? No. Next, we have Daniel Witherworth, just 23, joyful and very hard to work. On September 18, 2014, he met Steven, and 2 days later, his body was found in the exact same cemetery wall as Gabriel. Same positions, same staging. I don't know, I'm not the police, but I see a coincidence here. But Steven even planted a suicide note, blaming himself for Gabriel's death and claiming Daniel couldn't live with the guilt of killing the other dude, so he took care of himself also. And the police actually bought it. Why? Because probably they couldn't be bothered. They didn't really test the sheets that Daniel's body was wrapped in, a sheet that had literally all Steven's DNA on it. CSI London, this was not it. And even the police, this is kind of funny, even the police went to the family members of this dude and they were like, well, we found this suicide note here. Could you check that the writing is the same? And the family members, they were like, fuck no, that's not our son's writing. But guess what? When the police went into the police station, they said, suicide note checked. They confirmed it. Confirmed what? They did it again. They confirmed exactly the opposite. So what the fuck are you talking about? But finally, we have the last deadly victim, Jack Taylor, 21. He wasn't that openly out about his sexuality, but like the others, he did meet Steven on Grindr. And on September 13, 2015, Jack vanished after meeting him. And soon after, his body was found in the same cemetery wall as the other two. But this time, Jack's family did not buy the whole overdose. He knew he didn't use drugs, and they did push the police hard. Police told them that there was no connections to other deaths, but we know that's not true. But the family found CCTV footage themselves. Jack walking with Steven. That was the evidence that finally cracked the case. And get this, between Anthony's murder in 2014 and Jack's in September 2015, at least 3 other men narrowly escaped Steven. One woke up to find Steven had recorded the assault. Another one was injected drugs anally through his anal. Yes, really. But he managed to run away before the drugs could kick in. This man could really have been another name on his list if luck hadn't been on their side. But all 4 confirmed victims were found within walking distance of Steven's flat. All had GHB in their systems, and they were all staged in the same way. But yet the Metropolitan Police somehow failed to connect them, even when the LGBTQ community begged them to consider the possibility of a serial killer. The response was like, nah, no connections here. Families weren't just ignored, they were lied to in this case, and Daniel's parents were handed a forged suicide note that they insisted wasn't their son's. But police brought in their report that the family had confirmed it was authentic. It wasn't. Jack Taylor's sisters kept pushing to demanding CCTV to be reviewed around his apartment. At first, police did resist on showing that footage, claiming it wasn't really standard procedure. But when it finally went public, the man seen with Jack was quickly identified as Steven. So on October 15, 2015, he was arrested. By then, the police had finally checked that dusty laptop that they had in the police station for more than a year. And surprise, surprise, it was a treasure chest of a lot of incriminating evidence. Porn searches for unconscious boys, messages, chat logs, and timestamps even. Everything pointing out at Steven right in the face. Evidence that if they had examined when they took the laptop could have literally had saved lives. Instead, what the BBC called it as catalog of police errors allowed him to kill people for over a year. So in 2015, Steven was finally charged with 4 murders and multiple counts of administering toxic substances. During the trial, more victims actually came forward with their stories. Men who had survived Steven's drugging and assaults. Thanks to them, prosecutor added 6 extra charges of poisoning, 7 of sexual assault, and 4 of outright SA. And Steven, of course, he did play the clown card, appearing via a video link from a maximum security prison and pleading not guilty to everything, which the evidence, man. But on November 23, 2016, the jury had heard enough. They did declare him guilty of all the 4 murders, the essays of his surviving victims, and a total of 29 extra charges related to administering drugs and essays. In short, 11 men were confirmed victims of Steven predatory attacks, and 4 of them didn't really make it out alive. So the prosecutors summed it brutally. They said, for 3 years, the defendant committed murders and horrific crimes against young men, using GHB in a chilling, calculated way to manipulate and control them. Steven wasn't really a super mastermind, criminal mastermind, not really. He wasn't that smart. He wasn't even careful about the whole murders. He was awkward, sloppy, and very childish. But what made him so dangerous was that he could really act with total impunity because the system kept giving him free passes for life. But on November 25, 2016, the judge sentenced Steven to life in prison with no possibility of ever leaving. So basically, he will rot in prison for life. But the story doesn't end up there. After his conviction, the Independent Office for Police Conduct launched an investigation into 17 officers who had mishandled the whole case. Meanwhile, the victims' families sued the Metropolitan Police, and in 2022, the lawsuit was actually settled with a confidential payout. Translation: the police did pay up, but they admitted to nothing. A little suspicious? Yes. So the worst thing about this case is that Steven wasn't really an evil genius, serial killer, He wasn't Hannibal Lecter, for example. He was a weirdo who literally used Grindr to get victims. He used it like a shopping app, spiked drinks with GHB, and dumped bodies in the same fucking wall every single time, which is not very smart. 4 young men died because the police brought them as just gay guys on drugs. So not important, I guess. They didn't really connect the dots, which they were connected by itself. You didn't also have to be very smart to connect 3 mysterious deaths in the same place. Suspicious? Not for the police, I guess. The worst, they didn't really listen to the families, and they didn't take the victims seriously. Steven's success as a killer wasn't about intelligence, it was about negligence, institutional failure, and prejudice. If police had actually investigated even one of the earlier assaults, those 4 men would probably still be alive today. So yes, Steven is now behind bars. But this case is really about something bigger. A system that ignored the LGBTQ community until it was really too late. And that's where I leave you with this story. What do you think? Tell me about this. Was this pure incompetence, or was it prejudice at the heart of the investigation? Let me know which one of both do you think it really is. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a deep dive into true crime. And remember, do your skincare. And if you don't end up like a glazed donut at the end of it, you're not doing it right. Bye bye.